Private members' business, the Adoption Information Bill 2021, second stage. And I now call on Deputy Catherine Connolly to move the motion that the bill be now read a second time.
I move that motion.
And proceed.
Garmil Margaret. Thank you, Cahirley. And I think the simplest thing is just to look at the explanatory memorandum, which makes it very clear what this very, very short bill in the name of my colleague Thomas Pringle and myself. The main purpose of the Adoption Information Bill is to provide unconditional access to birth certificates for adopted persons. And it goes on to say what needs to be done to ensure that. Now, I don't think anything could be clearer. And actually, as I just ran from my office now, I saw an email coming in to please appealing to the government to do the right thing. So I'm standing here before you and I have so many documents and it's like a kaleidoscope in my head. I could pick any report I like and go forward. So I'll start with the simplest. What is the obstacle now, Minister? First of all, I welcome the fact that you're not opposing the bill. But in not opposing the bill, I hope you go further and say you're accepting the bill. And whatever might be wrong with the bill can be rectified with the principle. If you could confirm here tonight that you're agreeing with the principle that the time has finally come now to say yes, that people are entitled to have information on their identity as of right. The time has come for that. So if you're doing that, Minister, then we've reached a turning point, and that's good, and we'll all work with you. But I'm not sure if that's what you mean when you say you're not opposing the bill, and is that akin to killing the bill by another method? I hope I'm wrong, and I'm taking it in a positive light, that you're endorsing the principle of the bill, which is as of right with no conditions. And why do I say that? Birth certificates have been a matter of public record since 1864. And here we are over 150 years later, and we have people on the ground, men, women, struggling to find out basic information. The denial of the most basic of rights, the rights to know one's identity and family of origin. Now, I can quote the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, I can quote Clon, I can quote all of the organisations that say the time has come. But I'm going to look tonight at one particular report that hasn't been discussed in this stall, and that's a shadow cast long, an independent review report into incorrect birth registrations, commissioned by the former Minister for Children and Youth Affairs and carried out by Dr. Marion Reynolds. Now, I'm mentioning this for a number of reasons. Number one, the date on that report is May 19. And as I said, I could mention many reports. I could mention the Commission of Inquiry report, which I've here, and I'm going to quote from it as well. The recommendation 7 in relation to knowledge about your identity being a core human right. But I'm choosing this one tonight because this woman doesn't put a tooth in it, and she was given a task to do. And it might capture the lack of trust on the ground. And the reasons for that, there are many, many reasons. So I'm going to take hers, and if I have time, I'll go around to the Commission of Investigation as well. So this report was dated May 19. Now, for some reason, not explained to date, it was never published until earlier this year. Now, that in itself deserves explanation. After it was published, I understand from a report in the Journal that this Miriam Reynolds asked for her name to be taken off. Maybe that's wrong, maybe the Journal is incorrect. Perhaps you could clarify that tonight. It's a factual matter. Did the author of this report ask for her name to be taken off it because she didn't like what had been done to the report, particularly in relation to institution names being redacted? Did that happen? Is that a fact? And why were the names redacted? And why has the report never been discussed in this stall? So I'm using that, and then I'm going to use some of the things. And just to put it into perspective for people who are listening, this was a report commissioned to look at irregularities and illegalities that had been discovered in the Patrick's Guild by Tusla, belatedly, I think over 126, and then subsequently questions arose about many, many other possible illegalities. And this was a scoping exercise with TUSLA involved and the Adoption Society, and I'm not going to go into it tonight, except for a number of things to highlight. There are 7 conclusions in that report. Okay. And she tells us that for many years prior to 18, it has been known that there were incorrect birth registrations, and this is considered below, due to the action taken by those responsible for creating incorrect birth records to conceal their actions. Proving instances of incorrect birth records is a complex task. And she goes on. She points out it was and remains a criminal offence. She points out a number of other things that in her report on page 10, that the Taoiseach, then the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar in May 18, said that another dark chapter had been opened in the country's history. And he went on to say the people affected had a right to know their identity and their birth story. He added, what was done was wrong. What has done robbed children, our fellow citizens, of their identity. It was an historic wrong and we must face up to it. Unfortunately, it's not a historic wrong because we're continuing not to face up to it. Now, that lady, Miriam Rellens, and I'm not sure if she was a doctor, you might help me there in relation to that, made a number of very, very important conclusions and recommendations. And she said they merited further investigation. She also pointed out that robbing somebody of their identity had done great harm. Now, I'm just going to get that quote because she didn't actually. A great wrong has been done to those robbed of their right to identity and family. Again, as the Taoiseach acknowledged. She goes on to set out the law, just as the Irish Council for Civil Liberties sets out the law, just as the Clan organisation on the ground have set out the law, and they point out that it's a basic right under the European Convention, it's a basic right under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's not specifically stated in our Constitution, but it is an unenumerated right as far back as 1998 by the Supreme Court, which has been teased out. Prior to that, back in 1984, there was an interdepartmental report that said the right to identity was basic to a human being, although they didn't want it retrospective. Interestingly, one of the people on that interdepartmental report subsequently was one of the commissioners on the Commission of Investigation. In addition, Miriam Reynolds said that it's very important that the state learns from the experiences of those denied their identity, and from the irregularities noted by TUSLA and so on, and also the serious concerns about the other irregularities. She said, and again, near Cuirshe harm has been caused to children, their parents and family relationships as a consequence of falsifying or obliterating children's identity, and so on. And she talks about records being memories in lieu. She actually sets out that the records held by various organisations, including TUSLA, are memories in lieu. Can you imagine that? That's what people are left with, and they can't even get that. So I'm here tonight asking you to finally grasp the mettle. I realise there might be complexities in other aspects like tracing. I see no complexity in the basic right to have basic information about your identity. I can see no problem with that. When we talk about protecting mothers, I get nauseous because we're not protecting mothers. We're protecting a system that doesn't want anything to come out about what has happened. So I hope, Minister, that we're past that stage now and we're going to actually agree on this in relation to a basic right. The trust is, interestingly, the title of that report was a shadow cast. A shadow cast, and it still continues. If we look at the background very quickly in the time I have, the mother and baby home goes back, arising from Catherine Corliss in my own county, and she's on the east in Tuam, and the sterling work that she did. And arising from that, we got the mother and baby home. The terms of reference were extremely limited, notwithstanding that it was set up, it was good, and it took right up to October last year to get the report. An extraordinarily long time, with lots of interim reports. I've asked you for all of the correspondence. It should be given as of right, all of the correspondence between the any minister that was there, the department and the Commission of Inquiry. That should be given as a matter of course. We should not have to resort to freedom of information. But we come forward then, the report is back in October. It's not published till January, and it's done by way of leak. We were promised an investigation into the leak. It never happened. We learned from comments or replies yesterday from the Taoiseach that it's gone into the Never Never Land in the context of a bigger investigation. Now, it's a very simple thing to do. Find out who leaked the story. Now, it would seem that the Taoiseach himself, I don't know what role he played in it, but he was in the interview as part of the story that was leaked. So, again, Trust is really important, and it was said to us that that would be investigated, brought to a conclusion. It never has. And then, of course, they were never given the report. The survivors and those that were involved were never given the report. Subsequently, we had the debacle over evidence being destroyed that wasn't destroyed. And I had the privilege last week of spending hours with a person who, I won't say if it's a man or a woman for fear of identifying in that person's presence. And I read for the first time the letter that that person got from the Commission of Inquiry. And I can tell you categorically, nowhere did it state that the evidence taken on a video would be destroyed. It said with their permission and as an aid, an audio would be used. But no way did it say it would be destroyed. So we had all of that, and then we had the magical reappearance of that evidence, which was good. Then we had a failure by the Commission to launch the, which was their choice, but it was a wrong choice in my opinion, and most unfortunate. No press release, no press occasion in relation to that. And then subsequently, we had the extraordinary behaviour of one of the commissioners taking part in a seminar in Oxford. Quite clearly, the person was more comfortable in that surroundings on a seminar to Oxford than they were launching a report of such huge significance. Now, back to the identity. That report, and it has good points, let me say that, I've been very critical of this report, mostly in relation to the executive summary and the narrative. The actual body of the work is quite good, and I'm saying that, and I've said it openly, and I'm placing it on the record. The narrative of the executive summary, which is quite a substantial document, over 300 pages, is not acceptable to me. But even they, in their recommendation 7 on page 2 of the recommendations, say adopted people should have a right to their birth certificates and associated information. A person's right to his/her identity is an important human right and should only be denied in very exceptional circumstances. Now that's recommendation 7. They do go on to say in very exceptional circumstances you might have a procedure in a circuit court. I don't agree with it, but it's important to be fair to them that there might be a circuit court procedure where it could be teased out. So, but they do acknowledge the basic right. We have waited and waited, and more importantly, survivors have waited and waited for basic legislation. Now, I acknowledge that you have published the heads of a bill, but the heads of a bill is what it is. I acknowledge that you have started a process and in relation to consultation for a redress scheme, but unfortunately we're dealing with people who are extremely vulnerable, not because they're vulnerable people, but they've been made vulnerable by a system that has misused its power and its control over them. And we are running out of time to rectify that imbalance of power. So if you could tonight clarify when the redress scheme will be up and running. There are many other points I could make. I'm not going to, because I'm going to leave 5 minutes to my colleague. However, I can't emphasise enough that we leave out the patronising attitude. We leave out the word protection, because grown men and women don't need our protection. What they need is a rights-based system in relation to access to information, in relation to restoring the wrong, in bringing in a proper redress system. We have to stop infantilizing women in the guise of by a patriarchy. It's totally unacceptable, Minister. And people can speak for themselves, the men and women who have lived and survived through the institutions or watched their mothers or fathers suffer. So tonight, let it be a turning point. Please stand up and tell me, in not opposing this basic, very simple bill, and I acknowledge other parties have similar bills, perhaps even better than mine. I'm the first to put my hands up. Sinn Féin have tabled a short bill, and I understand the Labour Party have tabled a bill. It's testimony to the pressure that we're coming under, both from ourselves, because we've thought about it and read about it, and also from the people on the ground. Let's stop the pretence, let's stop the delay, and let's bring in legislation now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Thomas. Pringle, please.
I'm delighted to be able to jointly move the second stage of the Adoption Information Bill 2021, which I introduced at the beginning of this year alongside my colleague, Deputy Connolly. This bill aims to address the state's very restrictive laws on adopted people accessing information. Under current law, adoptees do not have the automatic entitlement to access their birth certificate or records relating to their adoption. This is an extremely important issue and a necessary bill, and I can only hope that it receives a level of support that reflects the incredible level of public support there has been for the survivors of mother and baby homes. I believe that in not supporting this bill, deputies would be doing a disservice to their constituents who have made it abundantly clear over the past few months that they support adoptees' rights to access their birth certificates. Every adopted person, indeed I believe every single person, should be automatically entitled to their birth certificate. In fact, under the 2004 Act, all born in the state have a right to obtain a copy of their original birth certificate on application to the Chief Registrar. Despite this, we continue to discriminate against adopted persons who have no entitlements to access their birth certificate or their adoption records. This is not acceptable, and we must do all we can to change this and ensure that every person in the country has unfettered access to their birth certificate. It is time to start treating all members of this state equally and with dignity. This bill, if enacted, would amend Section 86 of the Adoption Act 2010. This would allow adopted persons to access their entry in the adopted index, which would then enable them to obtain their birth certificate without the need for a court order or an order of the adoption authority. It is a bill that would require very little, in that it would simply be a matter of substituting Section 86, subsection 2 of the Adoption Act with new subsections 2 and 3. However, the significance and impact it would make on so many lives would be profound. Myself and Deputy Connolly collaborated on this bill with the Clan Project, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank and recognise the incredible work of Dr. Maeve O'Rourke, Miss Claire McGettrick, and all those at the Clan Project. I was delighted to be presented with Ireland and the Magdalene Laundries, a campaign for justice, an incredible yet difficult read. Written by Claire McGettrick, Catherine O'Donnell, Maeve O'Rourke, James M. Smith and Mary Steed. The book details the shocking life for many girls and women in Ireland's Magdalene Laundries, the incredible survivor activism that came following this, and the disappointing response that these activists have had to endure time and time again by this state. How much longer must we continue to let these people down? How much longer must we continue to deny adoptees rights to their own information? How can we justify continually asking them to fight this fight when they have already been through so much? These people deserve support and solidarity, not obstacle after obstacle, which has sadly been the experience of every survivor I have talked to. The book rightly describes how, in order to create a just society, we need to allow people access to their personal information. We also need to allow for the possibility of critical analysis and the opportunity to make this public knowledge. The Irish public have a thirst and a real want for this type of just society. Myself and my fellow deputies have seen this through the myriad of emails and calls we have been receiving regarding this. I have been approached by many of my own constituents in Donegal, voicing support and solidarity with those struggling to gain access to their records. There is a sense of frustration at the government's lack of action on this issue and a real thirst for action and for accountability. As the authors rightly state, Irish people in the Republic are no longer in an anxious post-colonial mindset. There is an appetite and aptitude for looking at how and where we have collectively failed. This is our opportunity right now to look at how we failed and to finally do something about it. It would be a complete shame to let this opportunity pass us by. Adopted people have waited long enough for this basic right. These people are not asking for much. They are simply asking for access to their records, their own information. They should not have to ask, never mind beg and plead for this, and they should be given complete, untampered, unredacted, unconditional access to these records. If deputies would like to be true and accurate representation of their constituents, which is what they are elected to be, they would support this bill, and I so urge you all to do so. And I know that the government has said that they are accepting this legislation, and that is appreciated. But as my colleague Deputy Connolly said earlier on, what does that actually mean, Minister? And maybe you could expand on that in your contribution, that actually accepting this bill could actually mean something real for the people to ensure that their needs are going to be met, and that's what this motion is all about. Thank you.
So now we're going to hear Minister.